Welcome back to another episode of Fearless. The other day, I was in my bedroom and I was folding laundry. Corey's home for a couple weeks as we were putting our older kids back into school. And I hear from the other room, my 2-year-old daughter, Georgia Graham, say, "Dad, you ruined my life." I said, "What? Surely she didn't just say that, because what 2-year-old? How would she even hear that?" And I have to remind people that she's actually 2 years old because she's pretty big for her age. And I think she lives with her older siblings, of course, and her vocabulary is just so large and wide. And I don't even know where she comes up with some of these words, but it's like, what 2-year-old hears, "You're ruining my life." And my natural reaction goes, "I'll show you ruin your life, little girl." And so as I don't do parenting episodes very much here on Fearless, because I believe I have little kids. I haven't been there, done that yet. And I'm always afraid too, if I give an opinion, the Lord will kind of show me and make me like eat my words or something. So I try not to have an opinion, because I was on social media one time and I saw somebody giving advice about raising teenagers. And in my head, I'm like, you have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. Who are you to be giving advice on teenagers? So today I've asked my dear friend back here on Fearless, Julie Lyles Carr. She's an author, she's a podcaster. She's been here before, which many of you might remember an episode we did about kids. And many of you wrote in saying that you loved having her. So Julie, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. The studio's amazing.
Yes, so we're back where this is our second episode here in the studio. So you're the first guest.
I am honored. I am very, very honored.
I was laughing because if people follow me on social media, my 2-year-old, people love her.
She's a star. She's a rock star. There's no doubt.
And just the other day, I was thinking about a book you gave me. Actually, when I was pregnant with her, I didn't know if I was having a boy or girl, knew nothing. And it was a pretty difficult time in my life. I said, I got to go find that book you gave me. This is a book that Julie wrote, Raising an Original, which this will be my Georgia Graham.
We need a new cover with Georgia Graham.
Which, by the way, I have to remind people are always asking, why do you call her by her last name? And I have to remind her it's her middle name. Like a double, we're from the South. We have double names.
Yep.
My last name is not Graham anymore. It hasn't been for 18 years. It's Lynch. So Georgia Graham's like a double name if people are confused while they're listening. But Raising an Original, I will start reading this and making lots of notes. But Julie has raised 8 kids.
8.
The oldest is
35.
And the youngest?
They just turned 18, twins.
Yeah, so you've been there, done that. So we can officially ask you now all the parenting advice. So this summer, I look back at things like we had just an incredible summer, me and the kids mostly because Corey was in Alaska working. But there were things I just realized I was struggling with. I have a 12-year-old daughter, Margaret. She's an incredible young girl, kind of an old soul. She's the mother hen of us all. But I realize I'm in this stage. I've shared with you before. I like raising kids like 7 and under. I feel like I'm really good at that. It's the black and white. Yeah. It's my yes is yes, my no is no. But now as logic is becoming in and they want to know the whys, sometimes, and we'll talk about this, because I said so. Mm-hmm. That's why. But I've also realized at this 12-year-old, this preteen stage, that parenting is stewardship. It's not ownership. That I don't own Margaret. I'm here to guide her and to lead her. And for me, that's something I'm like struggling to find that balance at this age. And how do I make that transition into this age group? Yeah. Any advice on that?
Well, I think that she's right at that age where it does get a little more challenging. And I don't know about for you, but for me, I loved being the mom of the children who would say, "Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am." And we're so friendly and so social and knew the social graces and all the things. And I loved when people would say, "Your children are so lovely. They're so this, they're so that." That was great. I took some identity from that. And then they start branching out and being their own people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're going to have an opinion that maybe one of my friends would find a little alarming, or maybe they would respond in a way that you could kind of feel the ripple in the room. Like, oh, I don't know if that landed the way that I would have wanted to have scripted it. So this place where we want them to be, we want them to start being their own people. We want them to be able to test out ideas and try out some behaviors within the safety of when they can get our feedback. But there is a dividing line where you start to realize, wow, this person who has felt like such an extension of me, who literally lived inside me for a while. And now I'm realizing in even greater measure the individual they are, the path God has for them, the challenges they may experience, the things that they may have to learn the hard way, the things that they might take my word for, and we might save them a little bit of trouble. All of that really starts coming to bear, I think, when we start hitting the ages, for example, where Margaret is at. Listen, when they're 6 and under, you can still physically pick that kid up and make them get in the SUV. But when you start hitting those ages and you need their cooperation in a fresh way, and they need to know that you see their autonomy in appropriate measure, those are the balances that can start feeling a little murky sometimes, because you're still the mama, you're still in charge, but they also have a level of independence that you want to be fostering that's appropriate. I mean, in Jewish culture, when children turned 12, they were considered of adult age. We don't have some of those markers in our modern society, which I think is kind of to our peril in a certain sense. We tend to protect childhood until somebody's 25 or 26. I don't know that we're doing them favors.
Well, and I feel like my kids have kind of grown up fast because in the summers we live in Alaska with adults.
Right.
I mean, they're every meal with 50 or 60 adults of our staff and with our guests at our lodge for Operation Hail Our Patriots. So they've grown up pretty fast. And with her being an old soul, I had these I've had high expectations and sometimes too high where I've had to apologize. But as we're at the age of being obedient and learning, I've always taught them why we're to be obedient. You and I've discussed this because we're to be obedient to a heavenly Father and to teach them young. That's why you're to obey your parents. And so when they get older and God's commanded them to do something, they'll do it. But I love it because parenting has seemed to have taken a shift in the last, I don't know, would you say 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, 5, 7 years.
Like gentle parenting.
Yeah.
What do you think about gentle parenting?
Gentle parenting. I mean, it is a hot topic, and we are definitely seeing, we're seeing it start to kind of shift the other way. My husband always says that sometimes when we have something that needs to be probably corrected, and then it goes 180, and then it sort of needs to move back to a place that's a little bit healthier. And I think we're maybe starting to come back that way. But gentle parenting has been fascinating for me.
Well, tell people what gentle parenting is for those.
Yeah, that's a great idea. At least the way that I look at it. There may be a better definition out there, but it's been this trend where we really ask and validate a child's feelings, which is fantastic. We try to keep our tone calm, also a good idea. We value and validate their experience as kids. Again, that seems pretty great. But then I think we also see that it's turned into a little bit of its own religion in a sense. You've got to follow this mantra and you need to say it this way. And if the grandparents don't talk that way, then you need to correct the grandparents and teach them how to talk to these children. And what we've seen in its extreme, I'm not saying that anyone who is implementing some of these ideas has gone this far, but in its extreme, I've experienced, you probably experienced too, a child who is completely losing their mind in, say, a sit-down restaurant. And mom and dad, rather than dealing with what's going on, are saying, it sounds like you're upset. Are you upset? I mean, clearly the kid's upset. We don't need to ask. We know, we can tell. So I've seen this really hard swing this other direction. I think part of it is a reaction to some of us who may have been raised in very authoritarian environments where how you feel doesn't matter, what you think doesn't matter, your autonomy doesn't matter. We're doing this and no questions
Every generation
asked.
thinks they know how to do it better than their parents.
Exactly.
We're going to do it a different way.
And we're going to make it, we're not going to have some of the same issues or the same hiccups or the same hangups. So there are components of the gentle parenting movement that I think are really powerful. I think teaching our children to understand and name what they're feeling, that's a powerful tool so that you can understand yourself. I look at in the Psalms, David is very good about being able to name how he feels. They are part of how God designed us and put us together to have feelings. The hiccup can be when everything seems to bow to what that feeling is. And I think some of us have had experiences where we've either parented in that way or we've seen some of the repercussions where feelings become king over everything. And it almost seems that you can't have some expectations for appropriate behavior in certain settings. And that, unfortunately, can be a recipe for selfishness. I don't think that's the intent, but that can start to happen where what I feel about something is more important than how it might be impacting people in the further environment in which I'm in. That's a little tricky.
Well, I tried gentle parenting for about 2 minutes. It's probably the complete opposite of how I parent. We were in a coffee shop and I've seen gentle parenting online, but it was like up close and personal. Somebody's kid was doing something. She goes, no. And I can't remember the child's name. Say it was Henry. no, Henry, we don't do that. What are our hands used for? They're used for loving and encouraging and embracing. So as we were walking out with, of course, my Georgia Graham, who's a hot mess, hair always in her face, and it's just me and the kids, I said, well, Margaret, I said, maybe I should start gentle parenting. She goes, by the time we got to the car, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, which I should learn a few things. I shouldn't be doing yelling and screaming to get in the car. And Margaret, who's 12, goes, how's that going for you, Mom? Is it working?
Knocking it out of the park, Mom. Yeah.
Yeah. But back to stewarding, like how would you suggest finding kind of this balance from a little girl from your yes is yes, your no's to no, to a kid that is trying to find her own way in the world? I know I made a mistake recently. They did something and I've had high expectations. One, because my kids have had to be in the spotlight. And I've always felt like people were kind of judging me of how my kids would react, but also wanted my kids to be enjoyable for adults to be around. And my kids, they're great. But I said something to her one day. I said, that was so embarrassing to me. You embarrassed me. And I realized that was an overstatement. Like, those were harsh words to use on a 12-year-old girl that was she's 12.
Right.
I have to remember
right.
she's 12 years old navigating this world. But to realize it's like you said, not in a branch of like our achievements, but they're their own individual. And that we are to steward them. And what are some of steps at this age, these preteen years, of really kind of preparing them, but also steps for me to like let go a little bit?
I wish I could cite correctly who I heard this from. I cannot remember who said this, but I think it's so powerful, which is we can't protect our kids from their own testimonies. And I have to say, there are a lot of times and a lot of things that I would say and do in an effort, because you and I have seen cautionary tales lived out. We have cautionary tales in our own lives, things that we wish we could go back and redo or re-say or re-choose. We have these things that we want to be able to impart. And being able to talk about our experiences and use those as learning tools for the next generation, that can be a great thing. But we don't actually get the ability to then control the behavior. I think we can share some insight. We can share some concerns. But there's something powerful too about saying to our kids, now listen, I know this is your life and I know there are choices you're going to make. Here's how things are going to be in our house. Be aware of that. But I'm no dummy. I know that you can walk out these doors and you can choose to do X, Y, Z, which might not align with the things that we've talked about here. But what I hope you know is that you have what you need to make good decisions. I know you're smart. I know that you have wisdom. I know that you have plans for your future. And I tell you these things not to try to control you and not because I'm trying to build my image, but because there are lessons to be learned, and I want the very best for you. Setting that intention, our kids knowing what our intention is, that it's not control, it's about equipping and launching, can be really helpful. Because I think sometimes what gets lost in the verbiage is we aren't stating, look, you're going to be launching from this house. You're going to be heading into a future. It can be this place where sometimes our kids mishear some of our best efforts and they think they're trying to keep me little. They don't think that I have what it takes to make it. It's important to me that my kids know that I have every confidence that with God guiding them, they're capable. They can do it. They can adult. I know they can do it. I wouldn't want my kids to have the sense coming out of my house that if I'm not hovering and making all the calls, they are immediately going to mess up. They are just in complete danger all the time, that they'll never make the right choice. And again, this is a little bit of hyperbole, like expanding maybe beyond what would be the internal conversation. But at the same time, we are saying to our kids our confidence in their abilities or our lack of confidence in their abilities when they do launch. That is a nuance that I think is really important to reinforce at these ages and stages, saying, I have every confidence that you're going to have what it takes, you're going to have the tools, you're going to have the know-how, and you're going to have the character to launch into your best life.
So with all of our travels this summer, and my kids got video games. They actually got it at Christmas preparing for this summer because they don't have a smartphone. They don't have an iPad. And if we are traveling, they always had my iPad or my phone, and Corey gives up nothing. And I'm sitting here on the plane, like, what do I do? So they always, they had mine. So they got the video games at Christmas preparing for this summer. So as we travel this summer, even my 2-year-old, she's getting my iPad, she's getting my phone. We got to do whatever we can just to survive 4 weeks in Europe and the Middle East with Georgia Graham. But I realized how quickly they got used to just these screens. And I think of them when they are trying to talk to me and how often I have my phone and I don't even look up when they're talking to me. Because one of my rules is if they were at a dinner table this summer and they had my iPhone, they had to put it down. They have to look at the waitress or waiter in the eyes and tell them what they would like to eat. But I realized when they're talking to me, I wasn't doing the same thing that I was demanding them to do. And it's how do we have this intentional parenting in such a distracted world? And because that's hard. I think when we look at probably people who are parenting, at your age, at your children, y'all were kind of like the guinea pigs, the first ones that had, cell phones or iPads and trying to figure it out. And maybe you realize, we probably gave it to them too early. We shouldn't have had it. And I know these are conversations that people are continuing to have. We're trying to figure out what's the healthy balance. And I've heard people argue on both sides,
Yeah.
Technology, no technology. Where do we go, Julie?
Where do we go? I really feel in many ways like I raised two separate generations of children. So my older four kids, we had the computer, we had a version of the internet. But even when my oldest got her first phone at 14, it was just the T9 texting. You weren't having to protect against anything. There wasn't a whole lot to do. And it would take you so long to text a friend. It wasn't like
it's where you had to hit the numbers 3 times.
Correct. You had to have it all.
The K
and
or
believe
whatever.
me, the older kids got really fast.
I was good at it one-handed as I was driving.
It was very impressive. But we weren't grappling with just the level of how everything in that technology is grabbing for your eyes and your attention. It was just a little add-on, a little gadget that can make your life a little easier. Fast forward to the younger four, and even though I had parented that many years, these older kids, with the younger four, and there's not that big a gap between number 4 and number 5, there's just 3 years. But as I look at it, it's like a completely different generation because these younger kids were raised completely in a technology-saturated culture and environment. I'm a huge tech geek. I love all the stuff. I love all of the devices. I love it. And so we've had it all in our house. What is interesting to me at this point, there was part of me that wanted to have some arbitrary rules. And we may have dabbled in that from time to time. Like everybody has to put this away at whatever. But I get so distracted myself.
Yeah, the rules don't work.
I forget.
Because I was going to ask you, what are some rules or, people want to call them the rhythms of life.
Yeah.
I keep trying, okay, we're not going to have our phone at dinner time. Well, Corey's working 4 hours in a time change and he's got to work. We keep trying and they don't seem to stick.
I know. And I have not myself arrived at a great, this is the way, let me bring down the stone tablets on technology and tell you what to do. One thing I have noticed that I will say I think is important for parents to take note of. Some of my kids self-regulate on technology very easily. My kids who are a little more extroverted, they will be on their phones for a little while. They call it having fawn time. That's how they call it. And, they'll scroll some social media, they'll be texting, whatever, but they are more attenuated to face-to-face conversations. That is how God knit them together. That is part of their originality. And it just hasn't been a big deal in terms of technology for them. It almost would have been too heavy-handed to have said, you can only, and it has to be this and on, because really at the end of the day, isn't the goal self-regulation? So if you know yourself and you know what you're tempted by or how many hours you're spending or whatever, if you can get a kid to the place where they're aware, wow, I could be missing out on this, that, or the other. What are the things I need to be aware of to make sure? Now, the flip of that is I have a couple kids who are much more wired. They're a little more introverted. They have robust online community. They're strong coders. They're strong gamers. They would be on all the time. I mean, without any kind of intervention, they would be on technology all the time. And so we've had to activate some conversations about, okay, talk to me about what relationship means to you. What does it mean to you in this way or that way or whatever? One of the ironies in it is one of my kids who's very much probably my most online person at my house. He's so relationally wise. So sometimes we carry into this conversation around technology. Someone's not going to be personable. They're not going to be socialized. Here are all the things we worry about. What's interesting with that kid of mine, though, is when he's with you, he's with you. He leaves the technology upstairs. He's spent his time doing whatever. He loves developing games and things like that with friends. But when he comes downstairs and he listens to you, he really stops and really listens. So again, trying to come up with something prescriptive to say, this is the way we handle technology, at least at my house, wouldn't have really been all that helpful.
Every kid's different.
Every kid is different. But I think one thing that we can say is relationship is one of the highest investments in this household. What are we doing that feeds and grows and nurtures and is an investment in relationship between all of us? And if you value me looking you in the eyes when I talk to you, if you want to make sure, hey, Mom, are you listening to me? Then let's make sure that it's reciprocal, that we're both engaging in the same way. I would say the person that may struggle with technology some of the most would be the mom and dad.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Sometimes it's not my kids. It's me. It's the habits. And I've been trying to tell Corey, we got to reevaluate. We got to rechange this because in a couple of years, Margaret will be driving. She's going to have her own car. She might see us driving and we're on our phone, but that's going to be a rule. So it's like we have to reevaluate. And I read that the average American checks their phone 144 times a day.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
And you just do it out of habit.
Yeah.
Like the first thing I do before the lights are on, you like check your phone to see if there's any messages or what just happened on.
I justify it because the first thing I open is YouVersion of the Bible. I'm like, well, but I did the Bible verse first.
Well, that is very good of you, Julie. That is very spiritual of you.
Thank you.
I might have checked Instagram first, okay? Maybe it's not even a text message. Maybe I went straight to social media. It's these habits. And you realize I've been on social media where I can just be scrolling and all of a sudden I realize like my heart is racing. Why? And it's like, I have a whole list of things I have to get done today. But here, before I knew, I've wasted 30 minutes of my day. Now, if my kid was doing that, I'm going to be on them like, why are you wasting time? You got things to do. And so I think we're all trying to figure out what's the best fit for our family. And, but it starts with us as the parents, setting that example and being able to put it down and being able to have a conversation. Austin was trying to talk to me the other day and I was doing something for work and he's asked repeatedly. And that's a big rule in mine. You don't ask things repeatedly. Well, you weren't looking at me and you weren't paying attention. Okay, you're right. So it's my fault to have the same respect for them as I demand them to have for me.
Right.
And that's hard. And I think it takes a huge evaluation of what the phones are doing to the American family, what it's doing to our relationships. I heard somebody say it's the other mistress in the room. Like even when it comes to or Mr. in the room, whether it's a husband and wife, like we're looking at our phones before we go to bed without even communicating to one another.
Right.
And some of it, that's our world we're in. We have emails that we got to answer right away and we can't wait till tomorrow.
We blame tech, but this is not really anything new. I mean, think about some of the stereotypes from, say, the 1950s. The dad coming in from the office, sitting in his easy chair and snapping open the newspaper and ignoring everything that was going on around him. The other thing that I think it can be indicative of, particularly at the mom and dad level, is I realize that part of my own tech issues, some of my own tech addiction, if you will, was because I had become so unboundaried in a way that I should not have been when it came to responding to clients and responding to emails and responding to texts and all of that kind of stuff, because I was in this position of never wanting anyone to think that I wasn't going to be responsive or professional or blah, 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 blah. And so that's really not about the technology. That is about the posture of my own heart, the fears I might carry, the unwillingness to say, no, after this time of day, I'm not going to check in on this way. And you know what? Things are not going to be, they're not going to burn down. It's going to be okay. God is my provision. So there are things that we sometimes blame for the thing that it is itself. But technology, it's an inanimate object. The algorithm is only what we feed it. There are things we worry about, but they're not the core issue. They're a symptom, but there's a core issue going on that we have to resolve. And that's why I point out my son, who is the one who is probably the most on technology, is also the one who's great at relationship, because to his core, relationship is really, really important to him. And so because of that, even though he does spend a lot of time on tech, and there may have been some better ways that we could have guided him, we could have put some better parameters around. But I can also see that the thing that I was concerned about was not necessarily something I needed to be that concerned about with him, because he had the core right. Whereas you could have a kid who's not on social media as much, who you're really controlling their screen time. But what they're taking from that is something that is a lot more dangerous to them, or really compromises how they see themselves, or is causing anxiety. One of my kids is really careful because she knows herself well in terms of her exposure to current events and news. she's very deliberate in the way in which she engages in news. Now, she was raised by a mom who cut her teeth career-wise in broadcast journalism. So I was all news all the time, every channel, look at every angle, on and on and on. I can look at all of that stuff, and sure, there are times that stories get me. I'm not saying I'm just, a robot about it. But she's so aware of who she is and how it impacts her and the posture of her heart when she onboards too much stuff that's heavy. She does a good job of regulating that and partaking, being up to date, but not making the diet of it that she saw modeled, because she has a different constitution than I do. And that's something to really consider as we think about these different issues.
Yeah. And when I think of living in this distracted world, distraction just doesn't come from screens.
Right.
Right. It also comes from overscheduling, perfectionism, the fear of missing out on things and always having to say yes. And I actually, to be honest, I don't have a problem saying no. I don't have that fear, like I got to say yes to everything. I kind of know my boundaries as a mom and what I can handle work-wise. I think the people I work with will tell you I say no to so much that comes onto my desk because I really do treasure this time with my kids. I know that time is fleeting and that time's a thief and it is going by way too fast. I really want family time. So when Austin was even little and I would come home from work trips, Friday night was our family night. No matter what, nobody was going to mess with that. And there was a season I felt like I didn't see my friends very much because I was traveling and I was working. But when I came home on that weekend, it was my family time. Right. And I think that's critical for families to really protect that, to protect the kitchen table. I've often said that our kitchen table is our greatest mission field. Our car rides are our greatest mission field. And it's so quickly, we got travel sports now, and we have so many other extra activities after school, and school takes so long that our time with our kids is so precious, and that we need to remove some things off. It's not just our screens to turn off, but we need to remove things off of our calendar and really focus on putting them first. And I've been working on this in the last year, is kind of putting our family time on the calendar first, because if not,
it's gone.
Your calendar's gone.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that time and the memories I can make. And it's Friday night, movie night with our kids. I would have a picnic table or a picnic blanket out, and we'd eat on the floor.
Yeah.
And that was a treasured time. And so whatever it is, I would just encourage it. We have to be diligent in raising our children that time is precious, and to be having those conversations about the Lord and our faith around the kitchen table. And I've talked to you about this on our car rides to school. We'd always listen to your podcast. My kids love it. They would ask, can we listen to Miss Julie? And we got in the car one time, and I think I've shared this before on Fearless. I can't remember. Austin started asking about salvation and what that meant as we were having conversations in the car, listening to a podcast. And he goes, well, Mom, may I ask Jesus to forgive me? And I can remember exactly where we were on the road on the way to school. And just this summer, it was so sweet. He wanted to be baptized up in Alaska. And he had asked last year, but I really wanted him to know what it meant. What did that entail when you stand before the world and say, I'm going to stand for Jesus Christ? I wanted him to know that the weight that is. And I know people often maybe question child salvation and child baptism, that they don't really understand what they're doing. And I've heard Greg Laurie say this before, and I'll put Austin's name in the sentence, is that Austin gave all that he knows about himself and understands about himself at 9 years old, and surrendered it to all he knows about Jesus Christ at 9 years old and understands. And we do that whether we're 9 or 59.
Right.
And so he wanted to be baptized. He asked my dad and Corey to do it. And it was just so sweet. The water is frigid. It's glacier water. It is so cold. So you were getting...
You mean it.
You were getting dunked into water and you come out. A little side note. Somebody comes up and he goes, Mom, people were asking me if I was cold. I wasn't, because I had to pee.
Yeah.
I said, you did, buddy? I said, well, did you pee on Grumps? Grumps is what they call my dad. He goes, maybe.
There are lots of things we need immersion for, right?
But I looked at that moment as a mom. I shared this with you earlier, that it was actually a heavy moment. It was a sweet and tender moment, and a moment of, Lord, thank you for your goodness. But I realized, like, my prayer life right there, of how much stronger it had to get for Austin, because now he's a threat to Satan. Satan will do everything in his power to destroy that little faith, and everything he knows about Jesus, and through his life will try to destroy what Austin stands for. And so I don't even know how to put it into words. I don't want to say it was a heaviness, but it was this sense of urgency of being the power of a praying mama on her
Right.
knees even more so for him.
Right, right. I think we try to mitigate that sense too, because as we see our kids making the choices we hope they would, there's kind of a track when you see kids making choices that those are not the choices you would make. And then there are those that we are excited about and we think, oh, that's awesome. And that's the goal. That's what I wanted them to know, exiting our house. That's where I wanted them to be. And yet at the same time, we have to have that awareness. I think it's so beautiful that you really saw that this is not the destination. This is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I continue to find at this stage of parenting, the parenting continues. I know there is a sense that we have when we launch our kids, but in many ways, when I look at biblical examples of family, it was very multi-generational. And I'm not talking about being the nosy mother-in-law and not allowing your child to go start their own family with their spouse and inserting yourself in decisions. I'm not saying that. But there is a level to which we are supposed to be still in influence with each other, sounding boards, places where we have village and community as part of extended family. And with that comes the reality that there are going to be ways and places. We try to systematize it because parenting can feel so overwhelming and so big that we all turn and we go, well, here's the problem. We haven't been naming and validating our children's emotions. This will fix it. Or, well, here's the problem. It's the technology. If we could just remove the technology. And I'm like, I'm reading back into scripture and the human condition and the places of human fallenness, there's nothing new. It's still the same stuff. There may be different vehicles by which we fall and we sin and we forget. So when it comes to our kids beginning to launch into their own faith walks, the thing that I think is powerful in what you're praying now for him is, he has a real enemy who's going to come for him in certain ways. And simply checking off the things that are trendy that we think are the things that distract and pull away, it's not enough. Austin is an individual. He has an individual walk, an individual journey, and he has some really unique places that the enemy also kind of knows about. We don't like to hear that, but when I look at how the enemy tempts people throughout scripture, he's very targeted. He's very strategic. And so we have to stay in that lane of continuing to look at our kids like, who has God designed you to be? The strengths, the beauties, and the things that might not be a temptation for this kid over here, but for you could be something that gets you sideways. And how do I help equip you and pray for you for that very individual, beautiful path that God has for you that gives you protection, tools, responses to temptation in a way that might not work for your sister, that would be a little bit different for her?
When I think about just even my own perspective of navigating and always kind of coming back and reevaluating, well, what works for me as a parent, but what works for this individual and what works for this one. And then I just got Georgia Graham, who, once again, it's going to come back.
Buckle up.
Come back to this one. It's going to be different. But when I think of the enemy and I think of Satan, when I think of everything we have on our calendars, I mean, I just had this advertisement come up for this like family calendar. I'm like, oh, I need that. That would help us. It was like a $300 calendar. I'm like, I don't need that calendar. I take it back.
I'll print something off from the
But when we look how distracted, and I think the enemy, he doesn't just need to outright attack us if we're all distracted, right? The family condition, the family heart. And I think we just need to be so intentional with our time with our kids, individually and as a family. And that needs to be protected because it goes by so fast. I'm sure you thinking 8 kids, that was never going to come to an end.
Fast.
And now you're got a grandma and it's the next generation. I see that and I see it like slipping through and I regret so much of lost time. That to take back our calendars, to take back the distraction, to scale back on the phones, which I know says easier and done, but it's going to have the choice that you choose daily. But that we have to set that example to our kids. That I want them to know that they have me. They got my attention. They have my time. Because I think one day I want them to come back and I'm still there no matter how old we are. I'm almost 40 and I still want to go to my mama and have her time.
Right.
But it's funny, even with the older generation at my parents' house,
they're on distracted
their phones.
too.
They're on
Everybody's on their phones. And Sissy, you bring up something I think is really important. We tend to think about the enemy pulling us away through bad things. We fail to recognize that he's really good at using good things to keep us from the best. I mean, it wasn't a pack of Twizzlers on the tree back in the garden. It was fruit. There are things that are fruit bearing that are good that can pull us away from what is best. and the discernment that we need. So things like kids' sports and Awanas, all these different things where we pack our schedules, because I've known families that, well, we're not going to do all the sports, but they are up at the church morning, noon, and night and never have family time. Well, that's something that's good, that's being used to compete against the best. And so this place of really being willing to take a look at through calendars and that kind of thing, it's not that it's all bad. A lot of it's probably good, but what is actually best on that calendar? That's what really should remain. That's where I think we really struggle.
And I think
today.
there's seasons for things.
Right.
I was just explaining to a friend, there's a season of service that you might be even busy serving in the church or serving in Bible study or hosting devotions, whatever it might be. But there's also a season to let that go.
Right.
And to say, no, I'm sorry, this is not the season for me to serve at the church. I got to really put my family in. I think Sundays, taking back the Sabbath, not being so distracted, let that be a time to reset for your family. Because once again, I know people that can be at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, or in their volunteering and I've said this in my own circle of friends, it's okay to say no. And it's okay to say no for your children.
Right.
Not to be signing them up for everything. They can be still.
They can be bored. Bored's good.
That's what my mom says.
Yeah. Bored sometimes is the best.
Well, and if you say you're bored, you're going to be in trouble. My mom, I'll show you bored. I'll give you quite a few things to do.
We're going to learn how to clean toilets.
Exactly.
If you're so bored.
Well, Julie, I just want to say thank you. You are always a source of wisdom, especially as I'm navigating and realizing, okay, I've gotten some things wrong. And it's okay, I think, as parents to show ourselves grace.
Absolutely.
That we're going to get things wrong. And it's also okay to tell your kids that you got it wrong.
It's actually great to tell your kids you got things wrong.
Yeah, my mom was good at that, to come and say, I'm sorry, I spoke too harshly. And I had to do that with Austin the other day. I reacted in a way that I would be mad if he reacted that way. And I said, Austin, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. But as parents, to show ourselves grace and just keep reevaluating and making it better.
Yeah.
Reevaluating our time on our screens or our schedules or our family time.
It's one of the great promises of God. And Jesus said he came to make all things new, and that we can have that. We can have that as the adopted birthright he gave us, that anytime we are repentive, he is redemptive. And there are going to be things, you're going to mess stuff up in your parenting. There are definitely things I can look back on and go, woohoo. And I'm sure that if you sat my kids down in this studio and interviewed them, we would need to have an alphabetized file folder of some sort to catalog the things that I could have done better. But in all of it, when we model for our kids that ability to say, we're going to start fresh. I need your forgiveness. I'm apologizing. Hey, I did this way for 2 or 3 years. I've rethought that, and we're going to try something different. That is very reflective of the nature of God, that we have a restart, we have a reset. That's one of the fantastic graces he gives us. Why would we not engage that in our parenting?
Yeah, I tell my kids all the time, look, mom messed up, but that's why I'm not perfect, but I need a perfect savior.
Yeah.
Just this trip, crazy summer. It was kind of towards the end of the trip, and we were late to breakfast. My dad kept calling me, where is she? Where is she? We were barely surviving that morning. Might have been a couple of spankings. There might have been some yelling and some screaming, and then tears, all before 7:30 in the morning. And I had to regroup my kids. And I said, this is not how we're going to spend the rest of our day. We've had a rough start, but we're going to fix it. And I'm sorry that we have started our day like this. And we spent our time praying. And then I turn on Forrest Frank. It's a good day.
Yeah.
We sing that all the way down the hotel room or the hotel hallway.
Reset.
All the way down the hallway and down the hallway to the breakfast room. And my dad looks at me and goes, y'all okay? I'm like,
gonna be.
We're going to be. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. So I just encourage parents, before you send them out of your car at school, fix it if there's something wrong. But anyways, thank you, Julie.
Thanks
tell people where they can get more resources from you.
Julie Lyles Carr, all the places, julielylescarr.com. I know you guys do beautiful show notes and all of that, so you can find me there, links to the various podcasts and all that kind of stuff.
And she's going to send me the Cliff Notes for Georgia Graham. She's already told me what letter or whatever
Here's the Cliff Notes for Georgia Graham. Buckle up.
Thank you. Once again, thank you for joining me on another episode of Fearless. And if you have missed any recent episodes, I encourage you to check it out at sissygrahamlynch.com.